Welcome back, friends, to episode number 2, solo episode number 2. Here's the thing. I really want to say thank you to the people who sent topic ideas, friends and clients and others who shared some feedback, some advice on the first one. I really love feedback and I need it. And so don't be shy. Hit me up on how I can get better and serve you better with these topics. Terrific. Anything you want me to talk more or less about? My kids tell me sometimes I ramble. So I certainly don't want to do that. I know you guys are all busy that are dialing in here, listening in. So I want to be really efficient with your time and deliver great value as quickly as I possibly can. Maybe you're on your way to work. Maybe you're getting a walk in. Maybe it's a micro break from work during the day. Maybe it's a quick walk, whatever it might be. I want to be able to give you a tremendous amount of value in a really short period of time, because when we can condense our learning time, boy, that's pretty awesome. And if I can be a small part of that, that'd be cool. So I want to talk about something today that I think is truly something that everybody is navigating right now, particularly something that can be hard. It's a thing. It's a word that, like, when we hear it, we sometimes just physically tense up. And it's change. I want to dig into change. You know, the thing that's interesting inside of my when we book a keynote and I go deliver a keynote, before that, I do a prep call with the leadership team to better understand what the audience is navigating. What are they worried about? What are they excited about? What things are, what do we want to drive toward relative to how do we want them to think, feel, and what do we want them to do differently potentially after their time together in my keynote. And so I love to gather as much information as I can in service of connecting with the heads and hearts, as I say often, in the room. And so part of that, of course, is I listen a lot to what they're navigating. And what I can tell you is over the last year in particular, and maybe even a little bit longer than that, but I don't know that there's been a prep call. I do almost 100 keynotes a year without the word change, right? Like, every organization is navigating it. And then when I talk to friends and family, and even in my own life, right, the amount of change is tremendous coming at everybody. And here's what I, though, want to dig into a little bit more deeply. This was a question that came up when I was in Palm Springs even last week, which is, hey, how do I navigate change that I didn't choose? And what a great question that is. And so I just want to take that sort of change word and just peel the onion back a little bit more on it relative to how do we navigate change that we didn't choose? And, we live in a dynamic world. We as human beings are people that are, moving, evolving, learning, living. And as a result of that, there's going to be things that happen sometimes in our lives, right, that we didn't choose to have happen. And of course, navigating change is hard for people, period, even if they chose it. But it's particularly hard, isn't it, if we didn't choose it, big time. I think about it from the lens of sports and with my clients. I mean, change was such a common thing when I was an agent, and it certainly is in sports. I mean, guys are getting and gals are getting, traded, hurt, released, healthy. Coaches are getting hired and fired. I think about it through the lens of sports, right? I mean, it's constant. And, the amount of, it can be baseball players getting called up, getting sent down, trades, releases, free agency. I think about it through the lens of sports. I mean, in sports, change is so constant. Call-ups, getting sent down, releases, trades, hirings, firings, constant change. And think about it in our own lives, right? I mean, maybe somebody listening is navigating a relationship. Maybe it's a breakup that you didn't invite in, right? Maybe it's a health challenge that you're navigating. And then I think about it in business, right? I mean, one of the things that's happening, right, is we're seeing layoffs. We're seeing lots of reorgs inside of organizations, reorganizations. People are coming into work the next day. Maybe they're literally moving their space where they actually physically work. New bosses. And then the little things that we don't choose, late flights, super weird people sitting next to you on an airplane. I could write a whole book about that. So there's that as well. And I am an optimist. And so I do at the core believe that we do hard things. This is a hard thing when we get uninvited change in our lives. We do hard things so that, I really believe this, we can do harder things. So there's gifts in all of this. And I think at some level we've got to find it. But unwelcome change is really hard. It is. It's hard. And so as much as I say we do hard things so that we can do harder things, and as much as, there's a story that we could tell ourselves about, grind it out, be tough, you can do it, all those things, for sure, I get it. But I also would say we have to be gentle on ourselves when we're navigating things that we didn't invite in, because it is hard, and it's hard for everybody. It's hard for people that you might think it shouldn't be hard for, or that it wouldn't be hard for, but it is. It's hard for everybody. So I want to unpack it a bit in service of sharing a way in which you could consider thinking about navigating unwelcome change you didn't choose, maybe a little bit better. So I want to dig into it. I'm going to share 3 tips. Now, I love stories, or maybe you don't, but you're about to find that out. I love telling stories. I think it's an awesome way to learn. I think it's a great way to bring things to life. It was last spring, and I woke up in the morning as I normally would, thank the Lord, and I was sitting and having a cup of coffee, kind of getting my head around my day, doing a little morning routine that I do, and this is probably going to sound kind of random, but my mom and dad, I'm 52, my dad is 87, my mom is 82. I talk to my parents every day, probably usually twice a day. And on the third time, side note, when I call them, they pretty much want to hang up on me. My mom's like, what? It's pretty funny. So I wake up that morning and I, do my morning thing, and I never like to call him before 8 unless it's my dad, because he wakes up early. And so I look down though to sort of see, sometimes I'll look and see where they are, because sometimes my dad will go out earlier in the morning, and I look at their location because we share locations on our phone. I know that might sound random too, but we do. I do with my brothers. I do with my family. Maybe you do too. I know you do if you have teenagers. Hello. But I wake up and I look, and my mom and dad are at Sparrow Hospital. Now, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little bit before 8, and they're at Sparrow Hospital, which is the hospital that's closest to my parents' house. And of course, that was a bit alarming. And so I call my mom and I said, hey, Mom, are you okay? And she very calmly said, well, honey, I think so. Your dad had a little, what appears to be a little stroke this morning. And I said, oh my gosh, Mom, well, tell me. And so she began to sort of share what had happened. And it was early in the morning. He had a pretty scary incident at home, a stroke, a neighbor, they got to the ambulance came, they went to the hospital, et cetera. And so they were in the hospital and they were there. And as she's sharing this with me, my dad goes, I'm going to be fine. He attempts, I should say, to say that. He couldn't get the words out. He couldn't say it. And he was really frustrated because he was trying to tell me that he was going to be okay, but he couldn't say it, which of course was really scary because my dad he's a stud, and he's so strong and he's just incredible. And so that was alarming, as you can imagine. And so my mom was, she's so awesome, and she said, okay, Ken, well, if my dad's name is Ken, so if tell Molly then, Ken, how old are you? And he couldn't say his age. He couldn't get an 8 out, and he was flipping it. He was trying to say he was 18, I think, and he couldn't say it. And so all of this to say, it was pretty scary for me. And then the docs came in and the nurses came in, and we hung up. And she said, I'll call you back or call me in a little bit. And I remember in that moment, like viscerally feeling just so tense and scared. And we had a wonderful family friend who probably is listening to this, Mary, who is just an angel from heaven. And she was right there with him. And my mom always says, when they break a bone or something happens, she'll always say, no, honey, don't come. We're saving you for the big stuff. And sometimes it's like, well, what's the big stuff, right? And so I said to our friend Mary, she said, you know how your mom always says, we're saving you for the big stuff? And I said, yeah. She goes, this is the big stuff. And so I take all this in. I'm of course navigating this in my mind. I'm also a bit of a realist. I was getting on an airplane very soon that morning to head to 2 keynotes before coming back to Atlanta. And so I'm sort of thinking about that, and I hang up, I pick up the phone and call my brothers, and both airline pilots and terrific guys. We're very close to, share our location too, by the way. Again, random. Maybe you think that's random. I don't know. But so I get one of my brothers on the phone, and we're sort of unpacking this. We have a conference call. We talk through the whole thing. And I share that because what I found myself doing for the next 4 hours, truly, was calling my mom constantly, which really was driving her crazy, calling our friend Mary, and trying to control a situation that I really couldn't control. And I for the last several months, a family friend of my dad's and my parents had a stroke. And so for the last several months, I'd heard my dad say so many times how scary it is to have a stroke and how sad it was to watch his friend, his name was Gus, just sort of have this stroke and really struggle. And man, it's just, oh gosh, I mean, I'd rather just go down than have a stroke, he said. I mean, and it was just random how much he was sort of talking about this issue. And so that was coming through my head of wow, I mean, this is something he had at some level feared. And so 3, 4, 5 hours in, I had a prep call. I do a prep call with my team. It was, I think it must have been a Monday morning. We do them on Monday mornings. I get on the phone and I'm literally crying. I don't think I've ever cried with my entire team on the phone. And I was crying. I was really anxious and really scared. And it wasn't helping that I was trying to control all these things that I couldn't control. In fact, it was definitely not helping. And so bottom line is I had to really drink my own Kool-Aid, think about the things that I do know cognitively inside of moments like this. And so I remember pulling back and thinking, I have to control what I can control. I have to control the controllables. And so I pulled back and I literally took a piece of paper and I wrote in the center circle, what can I control, right? I wrote in the center circle the things that were controllables. And then on the outer circle, all the things that I couldn't control. And so in the inner circle, I literally, I think I wrote, how I can support my mom, family and friends that were nearby that could support until my brothers or I could get there to support them and we could assess what we were navigating. My aunt and uncle that live an hour away, I could control the things that I could learn about the kind of stroke that he had when we were going to find out what kind of stroke that he had, which the docs and nurses were working on. And I could begin to anticipate maybe meals for them, maybe how to transition back to the house for them. And even, what are the things that I could do to learn about how do we prevent this in the future, potentially. And I hadn't really had any familiarity with stroke, so I didn't really know a lot. And so I write all the things that I could control, which was plenty, helping my brother who had kindly agreed to fly up and, could I book his flight? Could I navigate sort of all of that for him? And then all the uncontrollables I put on the outer circle, right? I couldn't control that it happened. I couldn't control that it happened. It had happened. I didn't have all the answers. I couldn't control the docs. I couldn't control the nurses. I couldn't control the way that, my mom was feeling or how she was doing, or I couldn't control a ton of things. And that simple exercise allowed me to focus on what I could influence, how I could, in fact, provide support and let go of the things that I couldn't. And what I found when I did that was, at some level, an ability to feel like I was supporting, but not exhausting anyone or myself while I was attempting to do that, which I would have done had I continued to try to control it. And my mom literally, on like one of my several phone calls to her, at which point I literally was not helping. I was making her more anxious. She said, Molly, you can't control this. Let go. We got it. We got it. And she is a really strong woman, but she can also say things to me that will flip me on my back. And I'm like, yes, ma'am, you got it. But I had called so many times, it was driving her crazy. So I wanted to identify the things I could control, let go of the things I couldn't. And so I share that because we have to stop focusing inside of circumstances that aren't invited in, but that are reality in our lives, on what we can't control and focus on what we can. Now, I'm not suggesting this is easy, but what I am suggesting is it's possible. So maybe you're listening and you have a similar circumstance. Maybe it's health. Maybe you're listening and there's been a reorg and you have a new boss, or there's a new product that you've been told, go sell it. Maybe it's a new structure. Maybe it's a new acquisition of a company that now is a part of your infrastructure as an organization. I mean, there are so many things that happen, and I would just encourage you to pull back, consider that situation, and then say, what can I control and what can I not control? And then keep it on your desk and just keep filling in the things you can control, write the things that you can't. And I promise you, number one, it's going to give you a sense of relief. It's going to create an opportunity for you to focus on what, in fact, you can make the most impact on. So it's a really powerful thing. So number one, when we're dealing with uncontrollable change, control what you can control, let go of what you can't. Number two is our mindset. And I want to unpack that a bit, right? Our mindset around it. Now, again, I do believe that we do hard things so we can do harder things. Mindset is something that so many people talk about. We talk about the story that we're telling ourselves, the script that we have in our head, and how do we shift that script to one that in fact is going to help us do what we want to do most, be who we want to be most. So when we think about mindset, I'll tell you an interesting story. It was middle of 2009 baseball season, and one of my players is a guy by the name of Jeff Francoeur. Terrific guy, outfielder for the Braves at the time, local kid from Atlanta, drafted by the Braves, top round guy, like Mr. Personality, terrific, teammate with the media, such a likable guy, and still is. Incredible husband, father, with 4 kids. He's now on TV doing a terrific job. Just a great guy. And the Braves and the entire city of Atlanta love this guy. I think his rookie year, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, The Natural. So he's just this shining star in Atlanta, but he had started to struggle pretty significantly at the plate. And I remember sort of early in that 2009 season thinking, man, I mean, as hard as it is to think, the Braves might trade him. They might trade him because he's not producing. And as much as Bobby Cox, the manager, loved him, as much as everybody did, he's just the most likable guy, he wasn't producing. And so my phone rings at 10:30 that night, and I answer it, and it's Jeff. Jeff Francoeur is his name. And I said, hey, man, what's up? And he's a wreck. I mean, literally crying. And I don't think he would be mad that I shared that. He's a pretty sensitive guy, and he's crying. And I was like, what's up, man? And he goes, I got traded. I said, where are we going? He goes, the Mets. And he was so upset. I mean, he felt like he let Atlanta down, Bobby Cox down, his teammates down, his high school, his community, his parents, his family. I mean, he just was so disappointed and really shocked at some level because he was just Atlanta's golden boy. And I said, Jeff, listen, man, I get it. It's hard. I get how you're feeling. I understand. Actually, Chad, cut that out for real quick. And I remember saying, Jeff, listen, I know this is hard. But we got this. We can do this. And there's a lot of good inside of this, man. I said, Jeff, think about it. This is a fresh start, a new city, a new hitting coach, new clubhouse. I mean, all of these things that we can lean into to hopefully help you do what we know you can do in the game of baseball and at the plate and all of that. And look, I mean, get out of this amount of visibility and pressure that you've been navigating for so long. And I think there's going to be some great things that can come from this. And, you know, he sort of heard me right. And then he was like, well, I'm flying out tomorrow. I mean, I need, you know, and he needed, obviously they give him the uni, but we needed, you know, spikes and cleats and, you know, where's he going to stay? And, you know, the team puts him up and all that kind of stuff. But we were sort of navigating even in that moment, just some of the logistics. And by the time we hung up, he was probably almost home. And what I needed at the most fundamental level for him to do was to shift his mindset. I needed for him to shift his mindset to one of opportunity, possibility, recognizing the gifts and the change, but also saying, look, Jeff, you got traded. I mean, like, we gotta, at some level, man, we can either fold up like a cheap lawn chair, or you can step out on the plate and show Atlanta that they messed up. I mean, it's up to you, right? We know you can do it. So look, I'm down for a hot minute of a pity party, man. But like, at the end of the day, dude, we got to get on an airplane and we got to show up in that clubhouse with a team that has raised their hand, that wants you. And we got to strap it on and get it done. I mean, literally, I think I probably said that. Sorry to be so real, and here's what was cool. We needed him to shift his mindset. We needed him to do it fast. He was halfway through the season. He was struggling at the plate in Atlanta, and we needed him to show up in New York and get his numbers, stats where they needed to be. And the other thing I think was important to do at the time was, from a mindset perspective, was, you know, and you can imagine, and I know there's probably people listening thinking this, a little perspective check, right? Like, dude, let's just keep it all real, right? You make a lot of money playing a game that you love, that you've loved since you were a kid, okay? We didn't have a season-ending injury, right? We didn't get released, you know, and just no team is opting in first. We have an opportunity to continue to do what we do as a baseball player. So let's just not lose sight of what this really is, and just have a hot second of perspective. And he's the kind of guy that matters to him. So there was a little bit of that probably threaded in there as well. So here's the deal. He gets on a plane the next day, gets over to the Mets clubhouse, calls me on his way home that night. I think they got him in for one at bat, and he got a hit, which was good. So he calls me after that night's game. He's like, wow, it's unbelievable. He goes, dude, it's awesome. He said, listen, they got this mother-daughter team in the clubhouse, and they make the most incredible food. He said it was sick. And he just went on and on and on about the clubhouse and, you know, the guys in the clubhouse, and literally was obsessed with this mother-daughter cooking team. But I share that because I needed him to shift the lens, the mindset that he was, I needed him, sorry, Chad, I needed him to shift the lens and look at it through the opportunity of the good inside of the new, the opportunity inside of the new, the gifts inside of it at some level. And here's what's cool. Fast forward that season, when he left Atlanta, his batting average was .250. By the end of the season with the Mets, it was .311. It pretty much every category, he had about the same at-bats. It was literally in the middle of the season, half the season. And, I mean, his slugging percentages increased. His on-base percentage increased. His overall hits increased. I mean, everything lifted in that season. Now, I share that because I do believe, there's no question about it, it was because of the shift he made mentally. Because trust me, it's just like us in our own lives, right? I mean, you get a new boss. I mean, if you sit there and go, oh man, this guy, I mean, I wasn't his guy. He didn't pick me. Like, I'm getting fired. I'm not going to make it. Or, you know, this new product I've been told to sell, or this new building that we just got moved to, or if we tell ourselves a story, a script of what a disaster it is, guess what? It will be. It will be. And if Jeff would have stepped up to the plate and thought, with resentment, frustration, anger, angst, with this is a disaster, this is the end, it would have been a total train wreck. So what we tell ourselves, and so I challenge you also, we got to control what we can control. But then we've got to pull back and say, okay, I'm going to give you a couple minutes for a pity party. But at the end, that's fine for a hot second. But then we've got to get our self-talk right so we can show up for the moment. One of the things that I talk about a lot is that the best of the best recover from adversity really fast. And sometimes uncontrollable change is certainly a little bit of that feeling of adversity. And we have to shift the script and recover really fast. Tell ourselves the right story. And, for me, I remember one time I played tennis at Michigan State and I lost a match to literally, this is going to sound a little disrespectful, but I'm going to say I could have probably beaten this girl with a broom, with giving her the doubles alleys and starting every game at love 30. I could have beaten her. I lost. I was the only one on the team that lost. I was so embarrassed. And I get home. I went home to my parents' house after which was 2 miles away from college. That's another fun story. And I remember crying. And my dad was rubbing my back and, honey, it's okay, and kind of supporting me a little bit. But after 10 minutes of rubbing my back, it's going to be okay, letting me cry, he literally goes, all right, it's over. You lost. Okay, you lost. What can you learn from it? And what can you do about it? And man, was that good, right? And I remember sort of taking that in and then getting in my car and going back to the tennis facility and hitting against the wall, the ball machine, and hitting serves. And I think even my coach popped over there to help me a little bit too. But it was like, I get it. It was something that happened that you didn't want to happen, but feel sorry for yourself for a hot second, but let's go. And I think I channeled a little bit of that mindset into Jeff in that moment. So I challenge you, when you think about this, you can't always choose change, right? You can't always choose it, but what you can choose is your mindset around it. You can choose your mindset around it. Shifting that mindset is huge. Number 1, we got to control the controllables, right? Number 2, we've got to shift the mindset to one that is going to take us where we want to go. And then number 3 is a little bit of a question that came up on a podcast. I had Lori Gottlieb on my podcast. It's actually episode 89 in case you want to check it out. She's a therapist, best-selling author. And it reminded me when I was thinking about this topic that change always involves loss. It always involves loss. At the end of the day, when you think about change, it always involves loss. And at the bare minimum, right, it's the loss of the familiar. It's the loss of what you knew. So, of course we struggle with it. It makes sense, doesn't it, that we struggle with it? And that's why I do believe we have to give ourselves grace. But here's what we need to do inside of these moments, right, of change that is unwelcomed. We have to find the gifts in it. We got to find the gifts in it. Because they're there. They're there. As hard as they can be to find, as hard as it is to go to that place, particularly with things that are really tough, death, health, big stuff. It's tough. But we have to find the gifts. And so I'll tell you something that was kind of interesting, and I'll just unpack a little bit of the gifts inside of my dad and Jeff. And so my dad, to circle that back around, it was a brachia. I think I'm saying that right. Stroke, brachia stroke, meaning it impacted the language. And here's what's amazing. My mom, for 40 years, was a speech pathologist. She was a speech pathologist. So I remember, meaning she helped people with word retrieval, language, certainly things like lisps. People would have tough time saying their R's, learning issues, all of those things. She was a speech pathologist in the Lansing schools for almost 40 years, I think. And so it was so cool. I called my mom when they had gotten home, and he was starting to recover pretty well, which is what apparently is the case with that kind of stroke. You can often get back almost to 95%. And so she was so cute. I called one day and she goes, well, your dad and I, we have a new routine in the morning. And I go, what's that, Mom? And she said, well, I went down to the basement and I got all my old stuff. I go, what do you mean? I got all my stuff from when I was teaching. So we're doing flashcards. Dad and I are doing flashcards right now. And we're going to do this in the morning. We're going to do it at lunch. We're going to do it at dinner. I'm like, wow, girl. She's like, oh yeah. Speech pathologist Mary's coming back out. And that was such a gift. How cool. I mean, she was able to contribute and support his recovery. It was super fun for them. And it was an integral part of what has become pretty much a full recovery. And I share that because what a gift. What a gift, that certainly a blessing that he recovered almost fully, but also, it was fun at 82 years old for her to pull those flashcards back out, to pull some of those games out, to sort of tap into that side of her that she loved so much for so long. And, I think about the gifts with Jeff, right? I mean, he was thinking in the moment that he called me all the things that he was losing. He was thinking about all the things he was losing, the hometown team, his teammates, the connection that he had with the fans, his relationship maybe with Bobby, having to move his family. But what he wasn't seeing is the opportunity for a fresh start, which, trust me, a guy who was rookie of the year at one point, who's now hitting 250 in the 9 hole, I think it was, he could have used a fresh start. An opportunity for Jeff to have a new hitting coach, new relationships, and at the most fundamental level, what I thought was going to be great was escaping the hometown pressure of being the hometown guy. That's truly is pressure, particularly for somebody who really, there are a lot of guys that don't really care about other people. They don't care what people think, all those things. Jeff is a very kind, giving, caring person. And so he carried that with him relative to everything from nonprofit and charitable things that he was doing in the community, which is fantastic, to, his high school coaches, to teammates, to friends, to high school people, there was just such an infrastructure of people that had known him and knew him in Atlanta that at some level that takes energy. That takes real energy. So I would challenge you, as you think about an uncontrollable change that you might be navigating, are there hidden gifts in that I'm overlooking? Are there hidden gifts in that I'm overlooking? All right, so to sum all of this up, when we think about change that we didn't invite into our lives, I would challenge you to consider, what can I control? What can I not control? Let go of what you can't control. How can I shift my mindset? Think about what we did with Jeff. And then, is there an underlying opportunity here? Is there an underlying gift inside of this change that can allow me to learn, to grow, to become a better version of myself so that I can show up as a better version of myself for others in the world? And then remember this, be gentle on yourself. Be gentle on yourself for a hot minute and then get going. The other thing that I would encourage you to remember is be a little bit patient inside of the change. I share that because I'm not a very patient person. And sometimes when we're navigating change, we have to be a little bit patient. Now, it doesn't mean that we can be patient with ourselves having a pity party. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying we can be a little bit patient with our ability to step back into this new situation, the loss of whatever it might be, because it is a loss of something, to step back into that new reality with the kind of mindset that's going to take us where we need to go. So I hope solo episode number 2 serves you, supports you. Feedback, keep it coming. Hit me up at hello@mollyfletcher.com or hit me up on Instagram, feedback, topics, ideas. Anything's welcome. Everything's welcome. And in the meantime, be bold and keep crushing it.